Kia ora, good morning. My name is Ellen and I'm here at the Edendale Reserve. I'm going to show how to multi-graft an apple tree. This little tree we have planted with the Edendale School, which is at the back of us, about 6 weeks ago in August, before COVID lockdown. And the tree is very healthy and it's settled in well, and we would have done that with the school kids, but of course with COVID it's not possible. So I'm gonna graft it because the window for grafting is closing quickly, and I'm gonna show the children afterwards how to graft a tree. So in order to do that, we need cyan wood, and I have given an instruction how to cut cyan wood. Quick recap: you collect the tips of your favorite apple tree in June or July. You wrap it in moist but not wet newspaper as thick as you can, and then you double wrap it in some plastic bags. This is to keep the moisture in, and you keep it in the fridge until the best grafting time for apples and pears is actually the end of September. We're mid-October. It's still okay to do that, but the window is closing rapidly for good success. So what we do, underneath the bark of every tree is what's called the cambium layer, and that's the layer where the liquids of life, the fluids of life, basically go up and down the tree, nourishing the tree, what comes from the roots, but also brings down the sugars into the soil that the tree makes with its leaves. And we need to connect the cambium layer, which is about 1 to 2 cells thick only, of this cyan wood. This is my desired apple tree. In this case it's a Captain Kit. We need to align that with the cambium on this tree, and then the sap of the tree, which is now rising, that's why we do it in spring, will push through into this new cyan wood if it's aligned well, and then it will heal that cut that we've made, that insertion cut, and this will become part of the tree and grow a new branch, and this branch will then carry Captain Kit apples. And I've got a whole range of mainly heritage trees of all sorts of apples with me. The wish from the school was cooking apples. I will put a crab apple on the top for good pollination, and I will put some dessert apples, some big apples, some small apples, some early apples and some late apples, some small apples and some big apples. So a whole variety, about 10 to 12 varieties onto this little tree, and we'll see where we go from here on. We might do another 10 varieties next year once that tree has developed further. So this is basically to showcase what you can do with a little bit of space and a little bit of knowledge and skills. Even in your backyard you can grow 10 different apples on one tree and extend your harvest time from the early apples in mid-February to the late apples in mid-August, and have an apple a day. Second part, this shows what tools you need. So there's very basic tools needed. You need the sign that you would have put up into your fridge in about June, July. You need some grafting tape. I use 2 types. And this is to basically wrap around the wound we create where we stick the two together, the cuts we create rather. Then you need just a very sharp, preferable a new blade, a cutting knife, a very sharp one. You need some secateurs, and you need some string, whatever type string, and some labels. I usually gather the odd discarded Venetian blind or shutter blind, preferably in metal, and I cut these to pieces, and I also use a special pen to mark and write down what type of apple I'm grafting onto which branch. There is a special tool. This is a grafting tool. This allows you actually to produce very distinct, easy cuts. But nothing is easy, so it's easy to get the precise cut right with this, but it is very much a little bit more difficult to wrap it so that it is in line with the actual tree. So yeah, there's no free lunch. There is a difficulty in either of the steps. In the manual step, the difficulty is to get a really sharp, nice, straight cut. And because you can make that cut much deeper, the signwood sticks in a lot better, and it's very easy to wrap it, which is really important that it's a good wrap, so there's a good connectivity. And with this, the cut is very easy, but the wrapping is quite difficult. And I'm gonna look for a branch that has the same thickness, and I would like to start with the bottom branch. The first thing I need to do is I need to protect that signwood from drying out, because this is quite exposed. So I'm gonna wrap my special tape around. I try not to wrap the butts too tightly, but this will just give my signwood some protection from the elements. So I'm gonna make a cut. I'm gonna use the cutting blade towards the piece that I want to keep, because this is only the squeezing blade. So I'm gonna make a fresh, nice cut. I might tidy it up with the sharp knife. And then I'm gonna find my location. I could do it here, but I do like to start a little bit further out in case something goes wrong, and then I have another little bit to go. So I'm gonna make the cut about here. Tidy that up a bit. It's just nice and clean. It's like a wound. A wound heals best if the cut is nice and clean, and secateurs don't always do a clean cut. Now I'm gonna make a V insert. I'm gonna very cautiously rock this back and forth and make a deep cut, and you can see I can basically attach that very deep into that branch, which gives me extra layer of stability. Right, now I'm gonna do my V cut here, that's why a sharp blade is really important. And I'm gonna check that I'll try and do this quite straight and even. So even though I've been doing this for a long time, I'm not able to do that straight cut with one cut, and it's not necessary. You can check whether it's a good cut by just putting your knife on there, and I can't really see too much sky, so that's then considered a good cut. Now I have to find the opening. I did it this way. Right, and now I'm gonna try to align minimum one side. So sometimes your signwood will be smaller or bigger, so it's ideal if you can align both sides perfectly, but I'm always making sure I'm aligning one side perfectly, because there's no use if something is inside here. It's rather like this, where the cambium then connects here, than trying to put it right in the middle where nothing connects. So now I'm gonna check. I gotta move that a little bit to the outside, and if I'm satisfied that it is a good connection, I'm gonna take another bit of tape and Start to very tightly wrap this around, and this tape is stretching itself very well. Unfortunately, it sometimes breaks. That's a bit frustrating, but it sticks very well. So I've got this cheapo tape, which is not as flexible, but it is really good if it doesn't rip. It is really good to use it and just stretch it and make a very tight fit. So this presses out any air gaps in between, and even if the cut wasn't 100% flat, it will basically press it together, and then you make a knot or two for safety. And voila, graft. And then I've got a special marker here. You have to be aware that most markers will actually fade, so I will say Captain Kit, and I will say 14th of October, and I usually do it on both sides because one side may fade, even though I have a special marker. One side may fade, but one side is barely exposed to sun, so the other side will always be there for me to know what's on that. And here's my marker, and this is it. Some people have little bags and they don't wrap the sign wood. They will just put little bags over it for a few weeks until they see some green in it. I would do that at home, but I would not do that with a public tree because that will just attract too many people starting to fiddle around. In fact, I will tidy up everything here to make it as less obvious as possible. That's why at the very end, after I've taken a photo of all these, I will also remove the labels. I know which branches are which, and we will document that, but I'm not gonna leave it here because that may just attract too many little hands or big hands, and that's not desirable because this is now very vulnerable for about 3 weeks or 4, and once it's connected it should be all good. I'm now going to show you the grafting tool. I bought this for the children to practice. I personally might not use it for the tree. I rather rely on my own skills, but it's a really cool tool if you're not there yet. So it's got basically a cut that cuts like a V, and I'll show you in a second. You have to align it in the middle of the branch, and then you get a cut like this. Then you've got your sign wood. This is the sign wood. This is my tree. I've already made an incision cut. Now the first thing is, this is a negative, so the first thing is on the bottom of my tree needs to be the positive, so I have to put it in the right way, which is the other way around. Now on this one I've basically created the positive, and now I can join them together. And now I would still have to look very closely that they're joined together on at least one side, and then I'm gonna wrap. The reason why for me this is less desirable is that there's a very short, like just 10mm attachment, whereas if I make my manual one, I make it much deeper, so that sits much more secure. My cut, without cutting fingers of course, would be twice as deep. If it would sit in here, so this could sit much further in, and it's much more stable to then actually wrap it. That's why I prefer my skills. But it's a good starting tool, and it's great for children to get some satisfaction in the initial cutting. Okay, so we have grafted Jack Hum crabapple onto the top. The reason for that is it's not necessarily an eating apple, though you can eat them if they're very, very ripe, then they lose their tartness. But it's general, it can be used to make crabapple jelly, which is really good. It's got high pectin, but the main reason is it's a wonderful pollinator. It basically flowers for a very, very long time, which means all these apples that flower at very different times can still be pollinated by this crabapple. And of course they're also pollinating each other, and they need bees for that, and the school actually has got a beehive basically almost right behind us. Another advantage of grafting is not just that you can put any fruit, like you have your Nana's favorite apple and you want to preserve it, but you're not going to live in your grandma's house. So you can actually take the signwood from your grandma's apple tree or whoever's, take it home, keep it in your fridge as we discussed in the past, and then graft it onto your tree. And that tree could actually be a tree in a pot on your balcony. The other advantage is that this piece comes from an already adult fruiting apple. So it has this genetic information. I have already fruited, I'm actually already an adult, even though this tree is actually just a child. So this will behave like an adult, meaning after it's grown on, it could fruit as early as next year. So grafted trees, usually you would, with a small tree, if you would graft on the bottom, like this is already grafted. This was a grafted tree the way we bought it. So each of these branches would already fruit, maybe next year. But of course we wouldn't allow that, because in the first 3 years an apple needs to really develop its core, its skeleton, and so we would remove any flowers or any fruit for the first 3 years. And then in the 4th year we can allow the tree to grow its fruit. Many people, when they buy a little tree in the nursery, they choose for how many flowers or even fruit it already has, and that's basically your worst decision. Your decision should not be how many flowers are on this tree, because you would really, even if it's painful, and I know it is because I've done it many times, you have to remove those flowers, because if you think of how much energy goes into that apple or plum or avocado or whatever you grow, this is all energy that the tree produces that is not going into the tree, and you're going to remove that apple and eat it. It might be a nice apple, but all that energy should really be in this tree for the first 3 years. So in year 4 you've got the strongest tree possible, and from there on it will give you way more fruit. And within the first 2 years of fruiting, like year 4 and 5, you would have more fruit than if you would have eaten the fruit in year 1, 2 and 3 together, because you would have robbed that tree of the energy to grow. So it is difficult, but never choose your tree upon how many flowers it has. Choose it because it has a really strong trunk, it has well designed branches, nice scaffold of branches, and that gives you a tree that you have many opportunities to work with, as opposed to having 1 fruit or 2 fruits in the first year and your tree is just gonna sit there, do nothing. Right, thank you very much and happy grafting.